I hope you're ready. I chose to print a very long stretch of the Bible. This is the classic story of David and Goliath. Since it is such a long story, I hope you'll enjoy it as a story. And also invite you to notice in the story the contrast between David and Goliath. And not only this contrast between David and Goliath, but the contrast between David and his older brothers, and the contrast between David and Saul as well. And again, in the sermon I'm going to be focusing on that one little piece of the story where David gathers together 5 smooth stones. Maybe a sip of water. And there came out of the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had greaves of bronze on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail with him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we might fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went into the battle were Eliab the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. Jesse said to his son David, "Take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000. See how your brothers fare, and bring some token from them." Now Saul and they, and all the men of Israel, were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in charge of a keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. And he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before. And David heard him. All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. The Israelites said, "Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him, and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel." David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done with this man who kills the Philistines and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The people answered him in the same way, "So shall it be done for the man who kills him." The eldest brother Eliab heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now?" It was only a question. He turned away from him and followed another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him as before. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he went for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep the sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth, and if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of the Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor and tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk for these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them. He took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag, in a pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to strike with me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the army of Israel, whom you defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hand." When the Philistines drew near to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell down, face down to the ground. Just going to have a little pause there. That was a long story. And very gruesome and vivid in its details, as the stories of that period of history were. And we'll do our much briefer reading from the Gospel. This is from the Gospel of Mark 4:35 through 41, the story of the miracle of Jesus calming the storm. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other hosts were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" And now may the Lord add the Lord's blessing to the reading, the hearing, the understanding, and the living of this the Lord's holy word. Amen. Well, again, I thank you for your indulgence in those long readings. I'm just going to take a breath here. I will, start my sermon today just by pointing out some of the contrasts, and I hope you notice them. It is to this very day a proverbial expression, to talk about being David going up against Goliath. Whenever an individual or a small group of people are going up much larger forces in the name of what's just and what's right, we often talk about being David going up against Goliath. I just treated you to the rich details of the story as it's recorded in the Bible. The first thing that really strikes me is David does not even try to fight Goliath on Goliath's term. He's not going to get up in the armor and carry a sword. He's going to do what he's already good at. He just kind of strips down the armor and just goes armed with 5 smooth stones. And one thing that's interesting, he only needed the first one. There are in life sometimes advantages in being underestimated, as David was. If you recall from the story, well, who is this kid coming out to fight me with sticks and stones? No way. Scott, Goliath has a very strong ego. He's boastful. He issues taunts. He's very self-confident in his size and his strength, and really does see himself as superior, to everyone else. A very strong ego, And I think the Goliaths of this world that sometimes we need to confront. They do that. They boast. They taunt. They issue lies and distortions. What we need, of course, is our 5 smooth stones. Or we're not limited to 5. It's a symbolic number. Those simple, basic truths that we can stick to and use to defend ourselves spiritually. Of course, David isn't exactly modest himself. I'm really interested in that. As he tells Saul, I can kill lions and bears with my bare hands. So he has his own strong ego, that's undeniable, but maybe the different kinds of strong ego. Goliath is, the way I read the story, he's just full of himself. He's just totally full of himself. His great size and his great strength, he's full of himself. David emphasizes the importance of trusting God and trusting in the rightness of his cause. It's also interesting that David wasn't like his brothers either, who weren't very respectful in their treatment of him and respectful of his abilities, and actually were rather dismissive and accusatory. And maybe one of the most fascinating parts of the story is that incident of Saul giving David his armor. David tries it, as you remember the story, and tries to walk around it, but the armor doesn't fit him. It's not him. Sometimes if we kind of see ourselves as David going against Goliath, maybe it's important. Not only are we not going to go up against our Goliath and do battle on Goliath's terms. Sometimes we don't go up against Goliath on our allies' terms either. We go up against Goliath by being true to ourselves, true to what we understand and know to be real and true. And again, it is interesting. He gathered 5 smooth stones. He only needed the first one in that battle. However, at the symbolic level, I would say, we need to gather as many smooth stones as we probably can, and I think maybe each one of us really needs to figure out what those are. We are confronted with, a very turbulent world these days. If you're like me, a lot is happening in this world that goes against our sense of justice and what is right. In going up against that, just hope I'm not being too repetitious, but be true to ourselves. Do not fight on the terms of those who are going up against, but to gather our stones, like the ones I said at the beginning. Margaret Mead saying that, don't think that a small group can't change the world. That's all it ever has. You can do no great things, only small things with great love for Mother Teresa. There's I don't know if Helen Keller actually said this. One I've heard attributed to Helen Keller, though, and for me, it's a smooth stone. It just lifts my spirits when things seem overwhelming. She's quoted as saying, "I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. I will not refuse to do the thing that I can do." Other smooth stones for me that come to mind are simple childhood sayings, right? 2 wrongs don't make a right. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Well, of course, we are learning that, I'm going to say the other side of that too. That doesn't make it all right to call people names. They actually do hurt. Naming and labeling people are the first step to, prejudice and discrimination and injustice. So the words that we use are very important, but in the spirit of, if you are receiving those names, that attitude of, that's a name and I'm not going to let it hurt me, that too is for me, a smooth stone. Another one, I talked about this You know, there's the outer demons and the inner ones as well. Talked about this a couple sermons ago too, but this time I printed it for you. Been involved in a Buddhist group in San Diego for a couple years now. It's a form of Pure Land Buddhism from Japan called Shin Buddhism. And I printed here one of their sayings. My understanding was that this reading or saying, a lot of Shin Buddhists have this memorized, was put together during World War II in the Japanese internment camps to give people courage and strength as they were going through that ordeal. I am a link in Amita's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I will keep my link bright and strong. I will be kind to every living thing and protect all those who are weaker than myself. This is the key part for me. I will think pure and beautiful thoughts. I will say pure and beautiful words and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amita's chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. This has kind of led to a spiritual practice for me. As I go through the course of the day, I'm not going to pretend to be a perfect saint. I often catch myself thinking very unkind things about some of the people around me. The freeway seems to bring this out in everybody. When people talk about this in the Buddhist Sangha, they're like, that's like the 5 or the 405. And believe me, I've been making, when I can, weekly trips to San Diego, so I am in the zen of the 405. I am in the traffic. The traffic is in me. I and the 405 are one. But I do catch myself thinking unkind thoughts. And sometimes even worse, I will say them aloud. For that, I use an abbreviated version of this. Not the whole thing, but I'll say to myself, I am a link in Amita's chain of love. I will think pure and beautiful thoughts. Say pure and beautiful words. Do pure and beautiful deeds. Under no illusion that I am capable of doing that 100% of the time. But, the point of this thing, it's not exactly a prayer. I don't quite know the word. Is a reading, a meditation. The Buddhists don't usually use the word prayer. It sets the intention, right? It sets the aspiration. I have a friend in San Diego who actually introduced me to the Buddhist temple of San Diego, and every so often I'll say something, and she'll say to me, Jonathan, that's not very Buddhist. And I'm like, oops. I am a link in Amita's golden chain. I will think pure and beautiful thoughts. I will say pure and beautiful words. I will do pure and beautiful deeds. Very powerful spiritual practice in its own. The good thing is you can do it everywhere, especially on the 405. God bless the 405. It's such a rich source of sermon illustration. I've used it perhaps way too much already, but anyway. Or someone, I won't name names, someone, emailed me this morning, feeling a lot of distress, alluded to my sermon from 2 weeks ago, and alluded to a poem I had used by E.E. Cummings. I hadn't thought of that poem for a long time. What I'm recommending, these are my examples, what I'm recommending to you is that you find your own examples, the sayings, the quotes. Haven't been doing it a lot recently, but a spiritual practice I've used is just to memorize a few uplifting poems and get them by memory and simply to say them. I think the poem that she was alluding to, let's see if I can do it because I haven't checked it, by E.E. Cummings, I thank you, God, for this amazing day, For the leaping green leaf spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything, which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and love and wings and of the gay great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, seeing, hearing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human merely being, doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. It's the first time I've said it in many months. It's kind of interesting that it's still there. I'm going to go back to that spiritual practice now that I got reminded of it in email, because every time I say those words, it really does lift my spirits. What I'm recommending is, last part of the sermon is just my own personal example. I shouldn't say just. These are my personal examples. I invite you, the sayings, the quotes, memorize, one or two uplifting poems. Find your smooth stones that will get you through the world that we live today, which is in all truth coming at us with fake news and misinformation and distortions and trying to get us to buy things, trying to get us to be afraid, trying to get us to be upset, trying to divide us against each other. I pray for us that we don't become those that we're confronting, and that we have the wisdom to gather the 5 smooth stones that would allow us to confront the Goliaths in the world. May the Lord so help us. Amen.